One of the things that I'm always telling students, particularly when it comes to comprehensive exams, is that it's really important that you make an argument. But what does that mean to make an argument? I'm going to break that down for you in this video. All right, everybody, in this video, I'm going to be talking to you about this idea of what it means to make an argument in your comprehensive exams. And really what I'm thinking about here is your paper holistically, okay? And so what we're going to do is I'm going to walk you through how I think you should be structuring your paper to present your argument, and how your argument actually, it needs to be a thread that runs throughout, okay? All right, so let's get into this. So first of all, you're going to have your question, right? And you might have multiple questions. You might get to pick your question, right, from a list, but you've got your question. You've honed in on it, okay? Understand what that question is asking you. If it requires you to do an analysis, do your analysis, right? It could be analyzing a data set. You might have to analyze some literature. Analyze, right? Analyze whatever that data set is. Hone in on the argument, on those claims that you want to make in relation to your research question, and make sure that they align with your research question, because one of the things that I've seen is very, very intelligent people who might have a very well-written paper, so to speak, but their findings, their arguments didn't answer the research question. Okay, so you have to make sure there's alignment between those two things. Now, once you have that down, here's how I recommend you go about writing your paper to present this argument. Keep in mind, if you're doing an essay, right, I think an essay has a slightly different approach. So this really is tailored to if you are doing a lit review, or you've done kind of like a secondary data analysis, that sort of a thing, right? And you have a data set from which you are making a series of claims. Okay, this is how I would approach writing it. So write out your methods, write out your analysis, write out your findings. Do that first. Start in the middle, all right? I always recommend, no matter what the situation, writing your methods first, because methods is very fact-based, right? I did A, I did B, I did C. Here's how I collected my data. Here's how I analyzed it. And it gets you over that hump of having a blank page, all right? It gets stuff down, it gets the ball rolling. So I always do methods first. Get your findings down, okay? You should know the claims that you want to make. Make those claims. Make sure your data supports those claims, okay? And then, as you're writing and maybe editing your findings, I always keep a notebook where I'm jotting down big ideas that I see going into the discussion. And I might have way more than I can put in a discussion. But usually what I notice when I'm done is that some are they're related. I can collapse them together. Some are not as exciting as I first thought, and some are way more prevalent. So just keep a notebook or however you want to do it, and document things, big topics that you think should be going in that discussion section. And then at the end, after you've done your findings and got that pretty solidified, move into your discussion, where now you're going to be talking about 2 to 3 big ideas that you see going in that stem from your arguments, right? So that discussion is going to be around 2 to 3 big ideas. That's taking your argument from the findings section, and now we're expanding on it and saying, wow, here is how what I found really informs the literature and helps to push the field forward. This is still critical, okay? Now, we're going to go back up to the beginning, okay? When you go back up to the beginning, you have to make your case for the problem. You have a good handle, or you should have a good handle on the problem now, because you've already written out your findings. You know what you found, and you know what these big ideas are that you put in your discussion section that are really important. You can tie that back up to the beginning. But as you're laying out the beginning, and the beginning is extremely critical, these are the beginnings that your committee is going to read first, all right? So even though I do recommend that you don't write it till the end, all right, because you need to get a handle on all the things that are going on with your findings, the claims you want to make, the big ideas. It is really critical to have a well-polished beginning. I think you can get away with in a comprehensive exam, a slightly sloppy ending, okay? It still needs to align and whatnot, but I think if it's a little sloppy, we might think, okay, you got tired. But you got to have that beginning tight and polished. Spend a lot of time on that beginning, because it's the first thing your committee is going to read, and you want to make a good impression. You don't want to make a sloppy impression. So now we're back at the beginning, and we're making a case for the problem. You need to lay out 3 big things. What do we already know about this topic, right? What do we not know? And why is it important that we know what we don't know, right? Or at least make steps towards filling in those gaps. Your paper is not necessarily going to fill in the whole thing and solve the problem. It should move us forward in understanding and solving that problem, right? Here's what you don't do. Okay, now the tricky part here is this may not be a question I had to, when I wrote my comprehensive exams, 2 out of 3 questions I didn't care about. They were horrible. They were boring. Okay. So you may not care about this question too much. All right. You still have to invest in it and really think about why it matters that you are answering the question that you're answering. Okay. Even if 20 other people are answering that same question at the same time doing this exam, you still have to have an original, thoughtful idea about why it's important that we examine this particular question. Okay. So here's what you don't do. Don't say, no one's ever answered this question before. No one's ever looked at the data set this way. Ta-da. Don't do that. Okay? Because that is never a rationale. All right? Just because we don't know something doesn't mean it's worth our time to go and figure it out. So never, ever, ever say that. Okay? Don't say, well, nobody ever did this before. If you want to say nobody's ever done this before, that's a start. Okay? But then you need to follow that up with, here is why doing this is important and critical to our field. No one's ever looked at the question the way I am going to look at the question. Here's why it's necessary to look at the question in the way that I'm going to look at the question. That's fine, all right? But saying nobody's ever done it, therefore I'm doing it, that is not acceptable. And that is not an impression that you want to leave with your committee, okay? All right. So get that down. Spend time on that. Get that beginning tight. Because what's going to happen here is by the time you're done with your problem, what do we already know? What do we not know? Why is it important that we know this? Then it should naturally, you're going to present your question and everybody should say, of course that's the question. Because logically, everything should lead us to wanting to know the answer to that question. I always like to think of it as a funnel where we're starting kind of broad. And then we are slowly working our way down, getting more and more specific until we make that case for that question. All right. And then after that, you're going to put in a theoretical framework, or you might have some additional background sections. You might need to define some terminology, some constructs if it didn't naturally fit into the beginning. Okay. Those are things that then you would do working your way back towards methods. All right. So when I'm saying or make an argument in your comprehensive exam paper, that is what it means to make an argument. Your argument is not simply just your findings, but even in that beginning section where you are making a case for the problem, you are making an argument about why we need to answer this question in the way that you are going about it. That is still an argument. And all of this needs to tie together. It needs to be aligned. All right, we need to see that every section relates to the one before it and that every section has a purpose. And then if we were to pull out a section, we'd be missing important information that helps us with that overall purpose and understanding your overall arguments when we get to the findings section. So it's very comprehensive. It takes a lot of work, hence comprehensive exams, I guess. That was a bad joke. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of time. So keep this in mind when you go forward. These are the steps that I recommend so that you can make your argument and you can be successful during your comprehensive exams.